Good morning, everyone. I'm Sarah Hayes. I'm the engagement lead for the CReDo project, and I want to talk to you this morning about architectures for data sharing. And I'm also joined by Jethro and Jonathan, who will be talking shortly. And you can see a list of names on this front slide. So everything that I'm talking about today has been put together by the people who are listed on this slide. We're a group of people who've come together over the last 6 months to have discussions about architectures for data sharing. And you'll notice that these slides are unbranded, and that's deliberate because we really want to start off some discussion and get that going across the community. So, the background. We feel that there is complexity and disparity in how industry develops connected digital twins and how we communicate this. So I sat at Utility Week conference last year in Birmingham, it was in May, and I found that it can be a bit confusing. When we talk about our digital twin projects, we talk about them in different ways. We have different diagrams to explain our digital twin projects, and it's hard to see what we're doing that's similar, what's different, and what we're doing that's being developed in common. And I think some of the language that we're using can be hard to access for non-technical audiences. So I think there's a risk here that we're creating some confusion, inefficiency, and friction. So this group of people came together and we set ourselves a challenge. Can we create a simple diagram structure that can represent any configuration of connected digital twins so that we can understand the differences between configurations and we can compare our different approaches so that we can better understand what we can share and what we need to develop in common. So the following slides present our thinking. So when we are talking about sharing data, we can do this in different ways. I can email you a copy of my data, or we can put that data into a central pot, a central database, and that could be an open database. Or it could be a closed database, and we can have controls over who can access that data. So we can have agreed security access and quality controls over that database. Or I can give you controlled access to a managed copy of my data. So what we're talking about here is what's the data sharing architecture? How are we sharing data across organizations? So organizations have physical assets. They may have a digital twin of those physical assets, but they will certainly have data about the assets. And they will have some sort of controls about how that data is shared. So we've got data going out and data going in. So what's the architecture that we can use to share that data? So as I mentioned earlier, we can do it on a point-to-point basis. So I can email you the file. But the problem is that can't scale for everything. We can't be emailing files all over the place for all types of data. That just isn't going to scale. Or we can develop central databases, and those databases can be open or closed. We can have controls over that data and how it's accessed. But with central databases, there's the question about who owns it and who maintains it. And once that database is set up, how is it maintained into the long run? And with central databases, we can't have one central database of absolutely everything. That isn't the thinking behind the National Digital Twin. So the question is here, are we duplicating data in central databases? So how will that scale over time? So we can think about a distributed architecture. So with organizations having control over their data and other organizations having controlled access to a managed copy of that data. So we can think about these padlocks here. What are the common access, security and quality protocols that we can develop to enable distributed architecture to work? And you'll see here with the arrows that with one organisation participating here with many other organisations around within this distributed architecture. They've got some data going out, but of course, because many other organisations could be participating in a distributed architecture, they could be getting much more data back in. So it's this, you're willing to participate, you're willing to share data, you can get much more data back in return. So in reality, we're not going to get just one version. We're going to get a mix here, aren't we? We're always going to get a bit of emailing of files. We're going to have central databases, and we could be moving to some form of distributed architecture in the future. So we want to talk about some examples now, and I'm going to hand over to Jethro to talk about CReDo.
Thank you, Sarah. So in the first phase of CReDo, we used a knowledge graph to represent assets and the connectivity between assets within and between each of the water, energy and telecoms networks. And we then developed models that operated on this knowledge graph to demonstrate the possibility of resolving the cascade of failures through the combined network in response to flood simulations of different climate scenarios. And by doing this, we demonstrated the possibility of how data sharing could enable simulation of the climate resilience of this overall network. And in CReDo phase 1, we simplified the development of what we did by adopting an architecture where the data and the models were all hosted on a centralized compute facility. So in CReDo phase 2, we're trying to take this a step forward, and we're developing our approach to enable a distributed architecture. So the plan here is that the data from each asset owner will be able to be hosted separately, so enabling the asset owners the possibility of maintaining full control of hosting their data, yet still retaining all of the benefits of the insights derived from sharing it. Thanks, Sarah. Back to you.
Thanks, Jethro. And over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you. The virtual energy system will create a decentralized network where each entity, for example, a power station or a gas distribution network, could develop their own digital twins of the assets they own. Each digital twin will be owned and maintained by these independent organizations, and the owner of the asset remains in control of their data in their digital twin. The common interface designs include security controls and defined data models and formats. And to become part of the virtual energy system, organizations will need to follow the requirements of the common framework. To achieve this, we're identifying standards and processes that exist and aim to grow them to meet requirements, working with existing energy sector digitalization activities and the National Digital Twin Programme. A priority for the virtual energy system is improving access to data between organizations in energy. This includes both the promotion of open and, where required, shared data. Development will be use case led, aligned to the real world and used to solve real world challenges. For example, modelling future GB energy needs and delivering benefits to both industry and energy consumers. And back to Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. And with the National Energy System Map, the idea is to use a central database with controls with those padlocks, so with controls over how data is shared and accessed. So while central databases have their place right now, the question is, how can we move to distributed architecture in the future? So the question that we want to put out to the community here today is, can you create your version for your connected digital twin project using the template that we've put together? And can you help us improve this template? So we're putting these slides on the data sharing architecture network on the DT Hub. You can join that network and you can upload your version for your digital twin. And the other question that I want to leave you with today is, can we develop the shared rules as a community that will enable distributed architectures to work across industries? Thank you.